So I'm going to try to make sure that you're waking up before we can go for lunch and break. There's a few more to be talked about, but I will try to go fast. First of all, my name is Alexandre Steiner, and I'm actually responsible for two things within Numergy. One is the development of international, and we're a French local provider, so that's a challenge. I will tell you more about it in a minute. And two is innovation with the ecosystem of startup companies, which is extremely important. And as actually Mark said a few minutes ago, we have a little bit too many dark suits today in the room, but that's actually quite important because most or half of my time I'm actually wearing jeans and meeting a lot of startuppers, and that's quite refreshing, and we need to do it. We should all do it a little bit. Anyway, who is Numergy? Because you're probably not very much famous on the international stage yet. We are actually an upside-down startup. We've been given some money to start with by three large stakeholders, SFR, Bull, and Caisse des Dépôts, being the French government, for 33%. So we're a private-public initiative. And our role and our goal is to actually deliver IaaS services. So we're a French cloud provider. I will come back to that because it's actually quite interesting. We've actually talked about a lot of how to avoid having local players and so on and so forth. I will come to it in a minute. So what do we need to do and what does the CIO need to do, whether he's actually in a small company, in a public sector, or in a large company? He needs more and more to actually rely on the strengths of cloud computing, which are around resource agility, cost effectiveness. And by cost effectiveness, we don't mean cheaper. I think it's a very important point. If it's cost-driven only, doomed to fail. Personal tip. Financial predictability and alignment with business priorities. This is extremely general. Everybody could have said it. Now, what's really important, and we're talking about the future. The future is now. Why? Because we're in a market that is not mature at all. So in a maturing market, it's probably even more difficult to make predictions. But anyway, our vision on that is very much to say that we're all going to move one way or the other towards more public cloud. What do we mean by public? We don't mean public services. We mean that it's mutualized and shared resources. So we had a question earlier whether we can actually manage security when we're actually sharing. The answer is a big yes. Can we do it? Absolutely. Is it easy? No. Do we have standards? No, but we have several routes to do it. So we can absolutely do it. But in doing that and in moving towards this, we have to be sure that we're going to have and we're going to manage and keep some privatized way of doing things, some public ways, and somewhere in the middle, the hybrid way. And the hybrid is probably the most important one to be really able to manage. So what we talk about here is very much something that we all have seen in the past, the first really, or the very old utility model. I mean, I was lucky enough to be raised in the Alps, and I remember when I would go to ski, I would actually go in the valley and I would see the factory at the end of the valley and some pipes going down from the mountains all the way down to the factory where there was some waters being actually forced to go into that, make the turbine actually go round and produce electricity for that factory. Very great things to have at the beginning of the 20th century, maybe at the late of the 20th, or the 19th, sorry. But after a while, everybody realized that having its private power supply was probably not the best way. Not only it was not always on, but it was probably more expensive and so on and so forth. So here we're talking about the same way with the cloud. You need infrastructure, you need IT from the tap. You need it from a utility model, so we'll have, and you will have to buy it from a public cloud. No matter what you think and say today, it's going to be the case. And that's true for every industry. So there's no... We can wait and actually pretend that it's going to be something else. It's going to be that way because it's the way the logic of the market goes. So we've talked a little bit with the logic of the market before. And I will actually spend a minute on that, and I will be a little bit optimistic. Mr. Sykes has mentioned earlier the fact that we would actually see Gartner saying that we had, I think, our friends from Amazon having a 65% market share or something like that for everything that was related to IaaS, sorry. Yes, it's a strong domination, but where does cloud come from? It comes from one thing, from a technology standpoint, it comes from virtualization. Virtualization version 1 or first generation was very much driven by what? By server virtualization. Server virtualization has been a very strong and first generation, which has been led and still is today at about 85 or anywhere between 80 and 85% by one company in the world, and that's VMware. So now with Amazon, we're at 65%. So we're making progress. In the second generation of virtualization, which is going towards not only servers, but storage and network, we are at 65% to start with. So we already have actually made progress. So that's pretty good from a European standpoint. We are actually a little bit better than we were before. Now, we're still in a weaker position than we could be. So we have to really watch it. So what we need to do is to know what to fight and how, or how to promote what we need to do. So if I would have to summarize everything I will talk about towards the public sector and the cloud, I would say just one sentence: let the market rule and drive by example. So if the public sector would actually drive by example, we would let the market rule. And that's really what we need to do. So anything that is around open data, public data, should be on a public cloud. No question about it. It's public information, put it on a public cloud. That's the very easy answer to make things work. Now, you have three barriers that you need to overcome. The first one is psychological. You always have been actually used to have your IT at home or to have it in the industry, to have it in your data center. We need to break that barrier, but you have to cope with it. So we won't break it overnight. The second one is technological. You have some technology that could be more or less performing, depending on the latency of the network, depending on the resilience of the data, whatever it might be. You have some technology barriers that you need to overcome. And the third one is legal. And the legal one is very, very strong and big, and especially in Europe. We're making much progress on a daily basis towards alignment, but we are far from there. So we have to be aware of those. So how to actually go against that and how to actually make it work? We, again, are a French player, and we have international ambitions, but we don't have enough cash. Even though we started with good cash, we didn't have $2 billion to put on data centers on a yearly basis, as some of our American players can do, because they have access to that cash. So the way around is to find a way to make sure that we can cope with those three barriers. So what we have actually initiated, together with our friends from Belgacom, with the big cloud, is the Cloud Team Alliance. And the Cloud Team Alliance is very much trying to actually go into making sure that we can promote IaaS, to start with, infrastructure as a service, on an international level, making sure that what we'll do is make sure that you'll have a local provider in every country you are. A local provider in every country means what? It means that it's actually having local capacity, local data centers, local compliancy and total alignment to the local requirements, local go-to-market, and because it is strong locally, it can go internationally. So what we're doing is federating national clouds so that they can actually become an international cloud that is a true alternative to the large international players. How do we do that? Well, the three barriers I've talked about are actually very much covered. The first one, legal. If you're playing with a local player, it has to be compliant to the local rules. So being strong locally is a first prerequisite. Second one, technology-wise, everybody who's going to be actually joining the alliance will actually be working on a way to make sure that API, interoperability, and openness is part of the way they work and develop their technology basis. So we'll work on that and make sure that we can do that, and having also latency issues of the network being reduced because we're actually in a local-to-local place. And the third one, psychological, well, being local, you know that it's going to be local, so you're very much reassured. But your needs are international. So you need to make sure that those platforms that are actually local can be interoperable with the rest of what the market is requiring. So that's very much the basis of what we're trying to do. So making sure that international EU companies, but also any kind of international companies would actually be able to come, overflow the local capacity to international needs so that you can make sure that you optimize what you've invested into. The strategy risk privacy is actually covered by the fact that you're working with local players. And EU compliance will be the name of the game to make sure that we can actually move faster. So local and EU cloud compliance is a must when actually getting new members on board. Alliance members serve clients and decide to use national or international capacity. So if you want it cheaper, eventually you can buy it from somewhere else. But you have the choice as a client to say where you want the infrastructure to run, which brings actually an interesting question. When you buy software as a service, you may want to actually have maybe a legal way to say that if you do that, you should have the choice of where and which infrastructure should run it. So separate buying actually the application from the infra so that you can buy whatever you want in application, but make sure that you can have a choice of where it's going to be run from. So that's just an idea. Alliance members can optimize international capacity through their alliance partners. And the alliance, of course, is non-exclusive. So we're open as long as you actually can match the requirements. So there are some alliance benefits and business rules. Not going to go into that. I will just conclude. I will just conclude in saying that basically let the market rule and public services drive by example, buy your IT infrastructure from the cloud. That's it for me today. I'm happy to take answers. And if you want to send me a mail to join the alliance, alexandre.steiner@numergy.com. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this.